came into mediation seemingly with open minds and appeared to have each other's, frankly, best interests at heart, along with wanting to obviously protect their own interests.
What's a little background about them? Were they, did they have young children, or they had?
No, they didn't have young children. They since they were both retired, it was a long-term.
Oh, they were retired.
Right, they were retired, and their children were grown, and they had no issues with supporting their children. Their children were completely independent. So for many couples, their children are a big source of their some of their conflict, but also
just
a big issue in divorce. Like, how do we successfully take care of our children?
Right.
So this couple, like I said, on the surface appeared to be ideal clients, and they were retired. So we didn't have future income issues. We had retirement issues from the get-go, frankly. So they had various different forms of retirement. They had income from IRAs, they had income from pensions, right? And although they were on the surface very good clients, ultimately one of them did come into the mediation with the attitude that they should be allowed to take one of their categories of retirement assets out of the marital estate. So as you know, the governing principle in Pennsylvania is equitable distribution, and it means that everything that a couple have acquired together is considered marital property and therefore subject to division. So it was a bit concerning to me that one of them said, well, I don't want to share this asset with my spouse.
Right, because you kind of need to come in willing to compromise, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, that's the whole essence of mediation, and frankly, it's the essence of divorce. Divorce is always a compromise. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you fall on the economic continuum in the state of Pennsylvania. It's always going to be a compromise. So really, that's one of the premises that people need to understand. And I know all of us at the Alpha Center speak to the compromise component in all of our consultations. But this person it turns out, was very rigid about this particular issue. And I couldn't change that person's mind. I tried really hard. I made it clear that this was marital property and therefore would be seen by everyone, judges, other attorneys, litigators, anybody looking at the couple's assets would determine exactly what I had determined. So I thought that we could find another compromise. Maybe I could look at dividing their marital estate in some other fashion that would still satisfy everyone. So we created the spreadsheet that we normally create, and I looked at all the different options, and we talked about all those different options. And they would consider them for a while, and then they would decide that wasn't going to work. So it turned out that they had to leave mediation. And said they were only the worst couple ever because they weren't willing to compromise.
Right.
It had nothing to do with them or their personalities or their willingness to get along, but they just couldn't seem to get past this stumbling block that they had created in their own mind about compromise.
So a couple of things about that. Not making that compromise means you go to court, right? And would mean that you're going to be spending more money to be told.
Oh, absolutely. So ultimately, they left mediation and they ended up litigators. They each have their own counsel at this point, and I would assume they're moving at a snail's pace. Litigation always moves at a snail's pace. The attorneys, speak to each other periodically, and both parties pay their attorneys when the attorneys speak to each other.
So it's a lot more money.
It is a lot more money, and it's just posturing. Bottom line, I mean, a lot of what the attorneys do with each other is posturing. Yes, they talk about what the law is, but it ultimately doesn't help get the matter resolved. What will get the matter resolved is the parties having the proper attitudes, and that's true for, as I said, for every couple in a divorce.
Do you ever have couples that start the mediation process and get kind of stuck and need time just to step away and come back?
We do have couples like that. And it's often, I've found, Georganne, it's the couples that have maybe not processed the emotional component of their divorce, maybe as much as they ideally should. Sometimes the emotions can, frankly, get in the way of trying to resolve the very practical side of divorce. So sometimes people can take a break, if you will, and think about the options and recognize that maybe they need to focus on the practical piece of it rather than letting their emotions control what they're saying. And frankly, I think for this couple that I'm describing to you, that was a component of this. They didn't talk about it very often, but I think that was a big component. I think the spouse that was insisting that retirement asset not be divided had a lot of anger toward their spouse. And I think that was ultimately their demise. So, they'll get it resolved. Ultimately, they will get it resolved, and they'll just spend a lot more money. It will take a lot longer, so they'll be in limbo for a much longer period of time.
Well, I know. I'm just thinking, all of the mediators at the Alpha Center are all attorneys, so I know they get the guidance from you about what the alternative could look like.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they do, and I know that all of us talk about the alternative at the point, as I said, at the point where we have our initial consultation with them. We all talk about compromise.
Well,
oftentimes I say to couples, if you can understand that your divorce is going to be a compromise, you will choose mediation because that's the best financial outcome for everyone.
Right.
So it's unfortunate that this couple ended up quitting.
Right. Well, and I love your title because really it's just given us a good look in the window of come in, being willing to compromise. Yes, we're going to have places we get stuck, but that's what we have you for at the Alpha Center, is to guide us. And you just putting that spreadsheet together and trying different alternatives, that is why a third party can be so helpful.
Oh, of course. I mean, we're the voice of rational reason, legal knowledge, experience, and helping the couple recognize that this is the reality of this. I think part of the downside in litigation is there's a real temptation for the attorneys to tell people what they want to hear. And the advantage of being in mediation and sitting there with both halves of the couple is that we have the opportunity to just cut through all of that. And we are not tempted to tell people what they want to hear. We're really committed to, as comfortably and kindly as possible, guiding them to a workable solution and a workable compromise.
And which is why you're all passionate, and I know you are, about the work that you do. So
Absolutely. I think all of us are committed to helping couples recognize that this is the best environment for everyone who needs divorce.
If we're going to compromise. Got it. Well, I'm sure, like myself and everyone else out there listening, always helpful information. This makes us all think. You gave us, just sharing that story gives us such a clear picture of if we're willing to try, then we should absolutely try mediation.
Absolutely.
Without.
When I heard from this client that they didn't want to share that retirement asset, I was convinced that I could persuade that person that they needed to adjust their attitude. I wasn't able to do that, and I'm not sure anybody will be able to do that, frankly. Maybe ultimately a judge.
Right, but God knows you tried, it sounds like. That's what counts.
Exactly. I mean, maybe it will come down to a person in a black robe saying, this is what you're going to do. And at that point, they'll accept it.
Well, I appreciate what you just sharing your stories. Stories are always good for all of us. We learned something about you. We learned about the services, the Alpha Center, type of people there. And we hope that you will come back and continue to share thoughts and ideas with us in your articles. I just want to say, if anyone, Alpha Center for Divorce Mediation, if you want to reach out to Debbie or any attorney there, mediator, they will be happy to answer any questions. Just have a conversation. Their phone number is 1-800-310-9085. So just pick up that phone and ask your question, because they're there to help. Debbie, thank you again for coming today.
Thank you, Georganne. It was great talking to you.